imagine a smartphone sitting on, like, 1% battery.
Oh, the absolute worst.
Right. But instead of just grabbing a charger and plugging it in, you literally stare at the screen and you scream at it. You just yell, push through, stop dimming, load the app right now with no excuses.
Yeah, which sounds completely absurd when you apply that logic to a literal machine.
Exactly. But that is exactly what millions of people are doing to their own minds and bodies every single day.
Yeah.
And the craziest part about all of this, they are proudly calling it Stoicism.
Right. It has become this entire modern aesthetic. It's the aesthetic of the silent sufferer.
Oh, totally.
Waking up at 4 in the morning, taking ice baths, refusing to ever take a day off. And they're basically treating chronic exhaustion like it is some kind of moral gold medal.
It is everywhere right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot open a social media feed without seeing someone preaching this relentless hustle.
Oh yeah, it's inescapable.
But today, our mission is to look at a genuinely fascinating stack of philosophical notes and psychological analyses that ask a highly uncomfortable question. Are you actually practicing Stoicism? Or are you just engaging in self-torture disguised as philosophy?
It's a really heavy question.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to figure out where this modern interpretation went so completely off track.
Yeah.
And we'll look at how to actually build resilience without just hollowing yourself out in the process.
And this is such a vital exploration for anyone who feels burned out but, guilty about it. Because real philosophy, the kind the ancients actually practiced, was fundamentally meant to help you live a better, more fulfilling life.
Right.
It was never designed to just make you miserable. So I invite you, the listener, as we go through this, to evaluate your own relationship with discipline. Take a really hard look at your endurance. Is it serving you, or is it slowly destroying you?
Yeah, because there is this massive illusion out there of what the sources call negative stoicism. The modern fake stoic is essentially someone who works themselves to the absolute brink. They deny themselves small, simple joys because they think comfort is a weakness. They never complain, and they brutally blame themselves for any normal human limitation.
Exactly. The internal monologue is just this constant loop of, I shouldn't be tired, I need to be stronger, grind harder.
It's nonstop.
Which completely distorts the original intent of the philosophy. I mean, take Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most famous Stoic. He defined Stoicism as the art of keeping a calm, rational mind in the face of circumstances we cannot control.
Right.
But notice what is glaringly missing from that definition. He never once claimed you must become some emotionless robot, or that you have to seek out suffering and utter silence just to prove your worth.
He definitely didn't say suffer as much as possible so everyone knows how tough you are.
Right, exactly. And Epictetus, another founding pillar of Stoic thought, he operated on a very simple, pragmatic rule. Philosophy is a tool to improve your life.
That makes sense.
So if your personal version of discipline is leaving you chronically exhausted, emotionally deadened, and isolated, the problem isn't that you aren't trying hard enough. The problem is your fundamental misunderstanding of the tool you were trying to use.
That brings us right back to the phone on 1% battery. When you confuse discipline with self-punishment, the mechanics of how you view yourself completely change.
Yeah, they really do.
Like feeling sad or overwhelmed or just needing a nap suddenly morphs from a normal biological signal into a profound personal failure. You start thinking, well, if I were truly strong, I wouldn't need to rest.
And that is precisely the mechanism at play. You strip away your own humanity. You stop viewing your emotions as data, and you just start viewing them as enemies.
But why do we do this? I mean, if true stoicism isn't about suppressing your humanity, why is modern society so incredibly obsessed with equating strength with suffering?
It's a great question.
What is the psychological root of this masochism?
Well, the sources argue it stems from a profound societal misunderstanding of what maturity actually is. We have collectively decided that enduring pain without flinching is the ultimate sign of being an adult.
Right, the whole grin and bear it mentality.
Exactly. But if you look at the foundations of psychoanalysis, particularly Sigmund Freud's early work, there is a psychological absolute at play here. Suppressed emotions do not just evaporate.
You can't just delete a feeling because it is inconvenient.
Precisely. They don't disappear just because you ignore them, they morph.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when you push down deep sadness or severe exhaustion, that energy has to go somewhere, so it transforms. It becomes chronic physical stress, a low-grade autoimmune fatigue, or these sudden, completely disproportionate explosions of anger over minor inconveniences.
Like absolutely losing your mind because you dropped your keys in the driveway.
Oh,
Or snapping at a barista because they got your order slightly wrong. It's never really about the keys or the coffee, is it?
Never. It is the overflow valve finally bursting. And furthermore, the text notes this ties deeply into how we construct our self-worth. People begin to anchor their entire value as a human being to the identity of being the strong one.
The rock of the family or the office.
Yes. The person who never needs help. And if they stop, if they pause to rest, their entire identity collapses and they instantly feel worthless.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche had a brilliant read on this. He observed that people constantly confuse strength with harshness. We trick ourselves into believing that the harsher we are on ourselves, the stronger we are.
But that's not true.
Not according to Nietzsche. He argued the exact opposite. Being excessively harsh is often just a defense mechanism. It is a way of running away from having to actually face your true self.
Okay, I hear that, but I want to push back on this a little bit. Because I know what someone listening right now is thinking. Isn't pushing through discomfort exactly how we grow?
It's a fair point.
Like, if I fail at a big project, or I am struggling through a really hard workout, shouldn't my immediate reaction be to just push those feelings of defeat aside and power through? Isn't that the very definition of grit?
It's a completely fair question, and it is where the nuance really matters. We have to look at Epictetus again to separate grit from self-harm. True self-control is about understanding yourself, not forcing yourself.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, when you understand exactly why you are experiencing a sense of failure or why your body is screaming at you to stop, you can make a rational choice. You don't need to use sheer brute force to keep moving forward. What's fascinating here is that avoiding an emotion is actually much easier and arguably much weaker than sitting down and facing it.
Because brute forcing your way through life is just a blunt instrument.
Exactly. It takes far more courage to say, I am deeply struggling right now, let me pause and examine why, than it does to just grit your teeth and blindly swing a hammer at the problem.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It is so much easier to just stay busy and stay moving than to sit alone in a quiet room with your own thoughts and admit you are overwhelmed.
Oh, absolutely.
But we don't just do this to ourselves in a vacuum. Let's move from our internal psychology to the external environment, because it seems like society actively rewards us for acting like disciplined little machines.
It is a massive social pressure cooker, and the modern workplace is the most obvious arena where this plays out. Think about who gets the most praise in a corporate environment.
Usually the person working 90 hours a week.
Right. The employee who works themselves to the point of clinical exhaustion is labeled dedicated and hardworking. The person who absorbs an impossible, toxic workload without ever raising their voice is praised as the ultimate professional.
Let's ground this in reality for a second. Imagine you're the new hire at a tech startup or a law firm. You walk in and you see nobody leaving the office at 5 p.m.
Yep, the classic hustle culture.
Exactly. You notice that the person who replies to a Slack message at 9:30 on a Friday night is the one who gets a public shout-out from the boss. You don't get a formal memo in your onboarding packet that says, hey, please work yourself to death here, we don't respect boundaries.
Right, it's never explicit.
You just absorb the conformity. You learn the rules of the game by watching what gets rewarded and what gets quietly punished.
And that subtle, unspoken dynamic is precisely what the French philosopher Michel Foucault described when he analyzed power structures. The source notes that Foucault argued power doesn't usually force us into compliance from the outside with physical threats.
So how does it work?
Instead, it shapes how we see ourselves. It creates an environment of self-surveillance. You essentially become your own prison guard. You start policing your own behavior, feeling profound guilt if you take a full hour for lunch, just to ensure you fit the mold of the ideal, uncomplaining worker.
You internalize the boss's expectations so completely that the boss doesn't even need to be in the room anymore.
Precisely. And this extends far beyond the workplace into cultural expectations as well. Take gender norms, for example, which the notes highlight.
Like the whole men don't cry thing?
Exactly, the classic men don't cry trope, or the idea that a real man bears the weight of the world in total silence. That is a toxic societal standard completely masquerading as Stoic philosophy.
It is weaponizing ancient wisdom to enforce modern conformity.
It really is. And if you look at how modern economies are built, the source brings up Karl Marx, who had a highly relevant insight here, regardless of your personal politics.
Right, and we're just looking at the philosophical application here.
Exactly. Marx noted that economic systems turn people into cogs in a machine, not by direct force, but by successfully convincing them that self-exploitation is the right, noble, and heroic way to live.
Oh, that is heavy.
It is. Modern toxic stoicism serves these systems perfectly. Think about it. A worker who never complains, who never demands a break, who views asking for a raise as a weakness, and who vigorously polices their own negative emotions. That person is incredibly efficient and profitable for a company.
But it leaves the actual human being completely hollowed out. I mean, you're a great asset to the company, but a terrible asset to your own life.
Completely hollowed out. And if we want to see how far we've fallen, we just need to contrast this modern expectation with the real Marcus Aurelius.
The actual Roman emperor.
Yes, he was commanding armies, managing plagues, dealing with betrayals. He was arguably the most powerful man in the world, carrying an unfathomable amount of stress. Yet his private journals, what we now call his meditations, are filled with intimate acknowledgments of his own anger, his profound fatigue, his deep disappointment in the people around him.
Wait, really? The great Stoic emperor wrote about being tired and annoyed.
He absolutely did. He didn't deny his human emotions, he observed them.
He didn't say, I am the emperor, I must project perfection, I'm not allowed to feel tired. He basically wrote down, I am exhausted, people are frustrating, and that is a fact. Now, how do I choose to act?
Exactly. That is the true Stoic approach.
Which brings us to a fascinating concept. Something that happens when you ignore Marcus Aurelius's advice. What actually happens when you operate as this disciplined, emotionless machine for years on end, because eventually the system breaks down. And usually breaks down at a deeply spiritual level.
It inevitably breaks down. And the breakdown isn't always a dramatic, visible failure like getting fired or ending up in the hospital. Often it's a quiet tragedy. People just slowly lose the feeling of living authentically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith. Bad faith is when you identify so completely with a role, the strong one, the disciplined provider, the perfect employee, that you literally lose your actual humanity. You stop being a living, breathing person, and you just become an avatar of a concept.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If you have ever felt this, you know exactly what Sartre is talking about. It is like driving a car on cruise control for a decade.
That's a great way to put it.
You are just coasting along on the highway of discipline. Wake up, work out, go to the office, pay the bills, sleep, repeat. But then maybe there is a life event, a sudden loss, a breakup, or honestly just a strangely quiet Sunday afternoon where you have nothing to do.
And the silence is deafening.
Right. You tap the brakes, and suddenly you feel this visceral physical panic. You look around and realize you have absolutely no idea where you are, who you actually are outside of your job, or if you even know how to steer the car anymore.
It is a terrifying realization. The physical sensation of realizing you haven't been piloting your own life. The notes cite Albert Camus, who wrote about this beautifully.
What did he say?
He described living life on total autopilot, the rhythm of waking, working, eating, sleeping, repeating, until that rare, piercing moment where the stage sets collapse, the rhythm breaks, and you are forced to stop and ask yourself, what am I actually doing all of this for?
Wait, stop there. If that realization is so common and so obviously a sign that we need to change, why do we fight it so hard? Why do we immediately try to distract ourselves and cling back onto that exhausting routine?
Well, this might be the most profound insight in the entire discussion, and it comes from the novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky. He argued that human beings fundamentally prefer to be bound by rigid rules, even incredibly punishing ones.
Why? That sounds crazy.
Because true freedom is utterly terrifying.
Are you saying we subconsciously prefer to be miserable and overworked because it is easier than facing the freedom of choosing who we want to be?
Yes. The terror of the blank page. If you are entirely free, you have to choose who you are. You have to face the chaos of your own desires, your own passions, and your own fears. You have to take ultimate responsibility for your happiness. But if you just adopt the identity of the disciplined grinder who has no time for happiness because they are putting in the work, you are off the hook.
So toxic stoicism, the whole hustle culture aesthetic, is basically just a very elaborate hiding place.
Precisely. If you are listening to this and you cannot allow yourself to rest or to be weak or to be vulnerable for even a single moment without feeling intense guilt, you need to understand something. You aren't actually in control of your life.
That is a hard pill to swallow.
It is. You are being dragged by it. You are a captive to the illusion of discipline.
Wow. Okay, that is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
So if extreme punishing discipline is bad faith and a psychological hiding place, what is the alternative? Do we just swing to the opposite extreme?
Not at all.
Do we just become entirely soft, drop all our discipline, and let the chaos of life run us over? We need to ground this in reality and find the middle path.
Right, because the truth, as always, is in the uncomfortable middle. Real life simply does not operate in these binary extremes of hard versus soft. We look to Seneca for guidance here.
Another heavy hitter in the Stoic world.
Exactly. Seneca taught a very pragmatic approach. You don't need to do everything. You only need to do what is necessary.
Look, we all know the core Stoic cliche, right? The dichotomy of control. Control what you can, accept what you cannot. We have seen it on a million coffee mugs.
We really have.
But in practice, people completely weaponize this against themselves. Let me give you a scenario. What if I'm trapped in a toxic job, but I have a mortgage to pay and kids to feed? Does Stoicism just tell me to accept it, stop complaining, and endure the misery because it is what it is?
That is the exact trap the sources warn about. Enduring a situation that is destroying you when you actually have the power to slowly change it, even if that change takes months of planning and job hunting, isn't Stoic acceptance.
So what is it?
That is avoidance. You are using the philosophy to justify your fear of making a hard change. The dichotomy of control, as taught by Epictetus, means taking action where you have agency, not just submitting to abuse.
Oh, that is a huge distinction. If you can fix it, but you just sit there and suffer while calling yourself a Stoic, you are lying to yourself. You are just choosing the familiar pain over the scary unknown.
You are. True Stoicism demands that you take action and change what you can. Toxic Stoicism just tells you to absorb more pain, and the difference between the two always comes down to your internal dialogue.
Okay, give me an example of the difference.
Let's say you are just bone tired right now, exhausted. Toxic Stoicism sounds like a drill sergeant screaming in your head. Don't be weak, push through, nobody cares that you are tired, keep going.
I think we all know that voice.
We do. But true Stoicism, on the other hand, acts as a rational observer. It sounds like I'm experiencing deep physical fatigue right now. Why is that? Have I been overextending myself? Do I need to rest today so I can actually be effective tomorrow?
So it is about actively cooperating with yourself rather than fighting a constant, exhausting war against your own biology.
Exactly. Which requires a fundamental redefinition of discipline. How do we actually practice a true Stoic strategy without destroying ourselves in the process?
Right, how do we actually do this?
It starts by facing a very harsh reality, one that our modern, control-obsessed egos absolutely hate. You do not control outcomes, you don't control your reputation, you don't control macroeconomic trends, and you don't control whether a specific project ultimately succeeds or fails. You only control your thoughts and your immediate actions.
But the toxic Stoic is trying to hack the system. They view their own suffering as a currency. They think, if I just suffer enough, if I sacrifice enough sleep, skip enough family dinners, and endure enough misery, I will have paid the price and the universe will owe me a successful outcome.
Yes, and the universe does not accept that currency. It is a fundamentally flawed attempt to control the uncontrollable. And when things inevitably fail anyway because life is inherently unpredictable, the toxic Stoic doesn't pause and pivot.
They just blame themselves.
They just punish themselves and push even harder. They think the failure happened because they didn't suffer enough. But look at Marcus Aurelius again. He reminded himself daily that the outcome of his wars or his political maneuvers wasn't his to decide.
Which seems like it would make you just give up.
But counterintuitively, letting go of the outcome didn't make him lazy. It made him incredibly precise. He focused entirely on the quality of his decisions in the present moment.
So the real strategy here isn't do more, suffer more. It's eliminate the unnecessary. Because working 12 hours a day isn't inherently better or more noble than working 8 hours. Especially if 4 of those hours are just you staring at a screen trying to look busy to appease a toxic workplace culture.
That is spot on. Seneca wrote that life isn't inherently short, we just waste a massive portion of it. We bleed our time and energy into things we cannot control, like the shifting expectations of society or the fleeting opinions of our coworkers.
And what happens when we stop doing that?
When you finally stop bleeding energy into those uncontrollable areas, you suddenly have an immense reservoir of focus for what actually matters.
And what about when you do fail? Because eliminating the unnecessary doesn't mean you will never fall flat on your face. We all fall down.
Nietzsche has a brilliant thought on this, which perfectly encapsulates the true philosophy of resilience. He said, a truly strong person isn't someone who never falls down. A strong person is someone who knows exactly why they're standing back up.
That is so profound.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the absolute hardest pill to swallow about true Stoicism is that it does not promise you worldly success. It doesn't promise you wealth or promotion or invincibility from pain.
So what does it promise?
It only makes one promise, that you won't destroy your own soul in the pursuit of those things.
That is incredibly powerful. So what does this all mean? Let's bring everything we've talked about together. True Stoicism doesn't delete sadness from your life. It doesn't magically cure your fatigue, and it certainly doesn't erase your doubts.
No, it doesn't.
It simply changes the lens through which you view them. As Epictetus taught, it's not the events themselves that cause us profound suffering, but our rigid, punishing view of those events.
It is the stories we tell ourselves about what our fatigue or our failure means about our worth as human beings.
Exactly. I want to remind you, the listener, feeling tired and actively choosing to rest does not make you weak. Recognizing that there are a million things in this chaotic world that you cannot control does not make you a failure.
Very true.
Trying to construct an armored version of yourself that never feels pain, never needs a break, and never cries. You aren't trying to become a better, stronger human. You are trying to become non-human.
And that is a battle against nature that you will always inevitably lose. So, we leave you with the core question that emerged from all our sources today. I want you to look closely at everything in your life that you currently label as discipline or strength.
Time to be brutally honest.
Exactly. Be brutally honest with yourself. How much of that rigid routine actually comes from a place of true understanding and self-care? And how much of it is just you sprinting as fast as you can, running away from having to face yourself in the quiet moments?
Think about the sheer amount of mental, physical, and emotional energy you spend every single day just trying to suppress your natural human reactions so you can appear strong to people who are probably doing the exact same exhausting thing. Now imagine if you finally stopped yelling at the phone on 1% battery. Imagine if you stopped fighting a war against your own humanity and redirected all of that wasted frictional energy into actually solving the root problems that are causing those emotions in the first place. Who could you become if you finally allowed yourself to be entirely human?